Hi, everybody, and welcome to the 100 Pounders meeting. Today is the 11th of June, 2025. And today I am absolutely delighted to welcome the lovely Jean Mac today to speak. Jean came to OA in July 2021. She lives she's from Inverness in the Highlands of Scotland. How beautiful, Bonnie, Scotland. And she's from Inverkip near Glasgow. So, Jean, take it away and over to you for your experience, strength, and hope.
Thank you so much, Rita. It is my absolute delight to be here. I am Jean, compulsive overeater in recovery for today. And yes, as Rita says, I joined OA back in 2021. And it's such an honour to be back here today because this is the meeting that kept me in OA. This is the meeting that just prior to coming to it, I had decided it's not for me. I don't think this is going to help me. And then I got guidance from a wonderful fellow that had pointed me towards OA, and he said, just go to this one more meeting and just listen. Just listen. And I did, and I heard my story. So it's really powerful for me to be back in here today and hopefully be of service even in the smallest way by sharing my experience, strength, and hope. So, yes, I joined back in July 21 and resisted it completely for a good 4 weeks before I found abstinence because I wouldn't say that I immediately embraced OA and the 12 steps. I had a very, very healthy ego back in the day, and I couldn't get past the initial language. So, for any of you who are coming in new and you find the language a bit of a barrier, my guidance to you is keep listening to the stories, keep listening, don't get hung up on. I had an issue hearing the word God all the time. I had so many issues and resistance to it. But ultimately, I don't think I would be here today and healthy if it wasn't for the fact that I got past that and listened to the stories. So when I came into OA in 2021, I had been back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with weight issues pretty much all my life. My earliest memories are of stealing food when I was like 4 years old and hiding things. So I think I've always had a substance issue with sugar, I think I would say. Now, when I came in, I think I was round about the £319 mark when I came into OA, but that definitely wasn't my biggest. And I'll share some pictures in a minute. I would say at my top, I was a size 30 UK, which is about a 26 in USA dress size. And through the power of the program, because it wasn't me, I was down at one point. I was actually down to a 14, 16 UK size. I've had a couple of health challenges over the last 6 months. I'm probably sitting about a 16, 18. And that was the first, that's UK sizes. That was probably the first thought I had when I was asked to do this was, oh, I'm not, yes, I've still released over £100, but I'm not the size I was, a year ago. And my ego was telling me, well, you need to wait till you're back at that again, and you can't. And that's really the whole power, I think, of this program is the physical recovery is only one part of the story. I want to talk to you today about physical, emotional, and spiritual because it took me time to find the spiritual, but that is the piece that saved my life. I think that's really, for me, that's at the heart of it. So I've maintained a release of £110 since coming in. And as I say, I'm not long after having surgery. I've got all sorts of shifts that have gone on in my body. I've not been able to do my usual routines and exercises, and I'm just having to go through another phase of my recovery. And I'll talk a bit about phases in a moment because accepting that this is going to be a lifetime work is probably one of the most peaceful things I've been able to do. I resisted that for a long time. So I'd love to do just a very quick reading before I jump into it as well, because this actually came up in one of my morning rituals, I think a couple of days ago, and it's from AA page 84. And it basically says, we have entered the world of the spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Now, it's taken me probably 4 years to accept that. I'm not going to lie. I have got a big old streak of self-will and ego running right through the middle of me. But once I got to acceptance of it being something I'll continue for a lifetime, now I can't imagine not having it, if I'm honest. And if you had told me that in July 2021, I would have looked at you as if you had just landed off another planet, because I just couldn't have imagined it. So maybe what we'll do, Rita, if you wouldn't mind sharing the pictures now, I just want to use these as a little prompt to give you a little bit of the backstory. As I say, I grew up in the Highlands of Scotland, where food was the love language of, you know, a culture where emotions aren't very easily or well expressed. Let's put it that way. And the picture in the top left was, I would say, that was me at my biggest. And we're going back, I think that must be probably about 20 plus years ago, because my daughter would have been a toddler at that point. The picture beside it, and the reason I've put these side by side, is I went from that sort of size 30 down to, I guess it was probably about a dress size 18 or 16. And this was a little picture perfect moment 10 years after that one was taken. Well, it wouldn't have been 10 years actually, because it was only about 5 years. My daughter was 5 in that picture. And I had just renewed my wedding vows in Disney. On paper, I was living the perfect life. We had this lovely picture perfect family photo shoot. And I will tell you in all honesty that those pictures side by side, I was probably happier in the one where I was at my biggest than I was in the other one. That picture where all I was doing was changing my weight. I wasn't addressing any of the issues or any of the challenges. I was living at that point in a really emotionally abusive marriage. 10 years into it, and had completely lost myself and my sense of self. Every character defect under the sun, particularly the self-seeking, people-pleasing, was at play. And this is always a really powerful reminder for me to look at, that I would have thought once I got to that shape, oh, everything would have been perfect and I would have been just so happy, because that's all I could think about was my issues are because of my size. And if I were smaller, the issues would go away. And I've lost my, hang on a minute, something's popped up on my screen and I've lost the, here we go, let me come back to the meeting, there we go. See all these reminders that come up on your laptops. And when I look at those two images, and both of them I was very unhappy, but in different ways. But the one on the right, the sort of happy clappy picture, I can vividly remember lying in a bath in a hotel room that night, crying, just absolutely miserable. And literally the day that picture was taken, I think when I recognized that night, nothing had changed in my life. All the things that were making me unhappy were still making me unhappy. I literally started eating again that night and did not stop. And what you're looking at on the picture to the right of that, once again in an orange top with my lovely friend there at the top, that was probably about 3 or 4 years on, and I put every pound back on and probably more. And ironically, I'm back at Disney there again. So that journey for me was incredibly painful, because the lie I had told myself was, if I can lose the weight, everything will be great. My life will improve. And it also, I think, really shows me, when I look back on it, the pressure and the lie that we put on ourselves. That, I mean, I remember at that point I was featured in a magazine for weight loss, and I'd already started gaining the weight. And at the photo shoot, they had to use bulldog clips at my back to keep my clothes on. And they still published those pictures, and they still published the story of my success. And that will never leave me. As if we think about the rigorous honesty that we have within the 12 steps, that was probably the most dishonest thing I'd ever done in my life. but again, very ego driven. So the pictures on the right there were the ongoing battle, and it was a battle that I was having. After that point, my weight just went up and down. I was incredibly lucky. I had really a massive amount of help at hand, incredible support from friends and family. The kind of work that I was doing gave me access to well-being support, but I just couldn't seem to, despite all of that, I couldn't seem to get to the bottom of it because I was not addressing the problem. Food was not the problem. I was using food as a solution to the problem, and I couldn't see that. And then I had what I would describe as my first spiritual experience. And truthfully, it really scared me because I'd never had anything like this before. But as Rita mentioned, I come originally from the Highlands, and I very often go back up there. And I'd gone to, it's actually a battlefield, which I know sounds like a very bizarre place to go and have a cup of coffee and a morning's bit of peace, but it's a very peaceful place, somewhere called Culloden, very famous battlefield, but it's a beautiful part of the world. So I was sitting and I was feeling at that point, we were coming out of the pandemic, and I had told myself a story that I was only struggling because I was so busy. And if the world could just slow down, I'd be fine. Well, guess what? The world did slow down significantly for a couple of years, really. And I still didn't change anything. And I was having that kind of reflection that, you know, when am I ever going to get a handle on things? And I was sitting with my coffee, and I got this feeling, and it was like, it was almost like that, you know, that inner voice you have in your head, but it felt different. And it basically was stop the battle and put down the shield. And it was as clear as day. And it still makes the hairs in the back of my neck stand on end when I think about it. And I didn't really understand what it meant at the time, but I knew there was something about what is the meaning of that battle. I can now see with hindsight, the battle was in myself. I was kind of shielding myself from the truth. I was battling with deep unhappiness, and really just completely pushing down all my emotions and all of my feelings with food. I was just ramming it all down with food, and I kept going back and forth on that. Well, that very day, out of the blue, a very dear friend of mine from America called me, and I told him what had happened, and he said, I think you're ready for me to introduce you to someone that could help. And he did. He introduced me to the person that eventually was, I think the Americans use the term Eskimo, the person that brought me to OA. And again, I would say saved my life. So that was my kind of journey in. And I came to OA. I'm not at all religious, but I've always been quite spiritual, I would say. But when I came in, and I'll sort of jump to these other pictures, and then I'll carry on with the journey. But I came in really desperate, but also resistant, which is not a great combination, but I think it's a very common combination. I really had tried everything. I couldn't possibly have had more help than I'd had. And I was at a loss as to what I should do next. And it was hearing the stories and hearing my experiences from other people and seeing the recovery, particularly in this 100-pounder meeting, that gave me a hope I hadn't had in years. But I also knew it was going to be tough going, and it was, and I needed a lot of help. And that's the beautiful thing about OA. When I think about the fellowship, the support, I met my sponsor, my first sponsor in this meeting, and it still blows my mind to this day the amount of time and support a sponsor gives you when you are essentially strangers to each other. It was this really incredibly wonderful lady that lived on another continent and took me literally by the hand into a space that I was so challenged to come into. And, you know, and I always look back on that and think, oh, if I hadn't met that particular sponsor and had that particular experience, I was taken through the steps, found it really, really challenging. However, it just gave me such an awareness. It explained so many things to me. It opened up a whole new way of living, is the best way to describe it. And that was all fabulous. And I would say that for the first year, in OA, it just felt like, okay, this is, I feel like I'm now pedaling downhill. It's all coming together. And on hindsight, what I can absolutely see is I was really looking much more at the physical side. It's somewhat the emotional, and I wasn't really going deep on the spiritual, if I'm being honest with it. And of course, when you stop eating the way I had been eating, there's naturally going to be a physical shift, but then there eventually comes a plateau, because and then you have to really look at, okay, what's happening here? Why is this not moving? And that's where you then have to start, from my experience, digging a lot more into the emotional side of it. I want to talk a little bit about the resistance and the ego side of things, because it helped me to hear this from other people when I came in. I struggled with step one, in one way not at all, in another way massively. I had no issue accepting that I was powerless against food. No issue at all. That was absolutely, step one, get that. But my life was unmanageable, was a real struggle for me to buy into, because I could tell you chapter and verse of all the things I was managing, because I was in that space where I was avoiding, I wasn't looking, I wasn't being rigorously honest with myself. I was just, well, I'm holding down this job and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. But in reality, I was having difficulty walking. I had painkillers in every single bag and pocket that I possessed. I was not managing financially, because I was eating so much when I was in business trips that I couldn't claim the money back on. That was actually putting myself in debt. I was causing issues. Is that halfway?
15.
Lovely, thank you. So that was the kind of, as I came in, that was the kind of arrogance and ego that I had. I would only be willing to look at what I was managing. So then, as I started to do the step work, this is where I had the most incredible breakthroughs. Not all at once, not all easily. And I will say there's an incredible discomfort in growth. But oh my goodness, the getting out the other side of it and having that realization was incredibly powerful. So let me talk you through a little bit of that. And I'll go back to the other pictures in a minute, Rita, but we'll stay here for now. So the physical, if we look at the three legs of the stool that I like to think of, the physical side of it, the transformation was, for me, the food neutrality was the big thing that I couldn't believe how much headspace I had. I remember saying to my sponsor after a month or two, I can't believe how much time I've got in my hands. I couldn't have been eating all that while. And she went, well, yeah, if you weren't eating, you were thinking about eating, or you were stressing about what you had eaten, and it was true. I mean, I didn't realize how much time food took up in my head. So that was probably the first thing that I noticed, was the effect that it had with that neutrality. It gave me headspace. It allowed me to start making room to start feeling the feelings. And that was not easy, because I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a pretty mellow character by nature, but there was a big old streak of Shrek that came out in me when I started feeling my feelings. And I was working with a therapist at the time who had pointed me to OA, and I would have my check-in. And it was probably about 2-3 weeks into my initial abstinence and really feeling things. And I came on to the call, and I remember vividly him saying to me, so how are you this week? And I will not use the exact language that I used, because it would turn the meeting blue, and we don't want to do that. But I can tell you, I just was like, how am I feeling? I'll tell you how I'm feeling. And I just went off on one. And he very calmly said, right, well, I see you're feeling your feelings now. I was like, feeling my feelings. I see how this works. I've got no time to eat, because I'm never done doing meditation and prayer and my step. And I completely threw my toys out of the pram. And I don't think this is for me. Is there anything else? Is there another approach you can take with me? And that's when he did something really powerful for me. He used that kind of blunt honesty of, I'll tell you what, he said, how about you actually shut up and listen in a meeting? Get over yourself and hear if you can hear that. And oh, I was livid. I mean, I was livid when I came off the call. Best thing anyone ever did for me, because I did. I then listened, and as I say, it was in this meeting that I started to hear things. So I went through quite a good phase then in recovery. And truth be told, I was probably getting a little bit carried away with myself. The physical recovery was getting me some attention that I hadn't had before. And I would have said I was getting an effect from that is not healthy. And that's a word that I really look out for now. If I'm getting an effect, my sponsor today will often ask me that, is it giving you an effect? And if something does, I step away from it, because that's not good news for me. So I was very, very, very lucky that I got to go to the OA birthday party about a year in. It must have been just over a year and a bit past my joining. And anyway, I thought I was doing great, so I did. And I was just about to start with a new sponsor at the time, and I go to the birthday party, and the very first workshop I went into was about spiritual bankruptcy. And it is not an exaggeration to say, and I actually said to the lovely fellow at the time who spoke, if I had seen and heard nothing else that weekend, it was worth every penny of the flight over. Because in that room, I had the wake up call that actually I was spiritually bankrupt. And I reckon if I hadn't heard that message, give it another month or two and I would have been in relapse. I think I was absolutely heading to prelapse, because at that point, my spiritual practices were, I was on nodding terms with my higher power. That's the best way to put it. Like if I met a neighbour out walking the dog, and I would be like, oh, hello, morning, and I would keep on walking. And I recognised there and then I need to sit my backside down with my higher power. I need to go deep on this. And I was very, very lucky that the sponsor that I then started to work with was not messing when it came to the spiritual side of things. And that's obviously why my higher power brought me to her and brought her to me. And I'll be forever grateful, because that was a game changer. Then I really feel I was moving into a different phase of recovery. And the only way I can describe it is, instead of thinking about connection with my higher power, I started to feel it. It moved into my heart. There's no other way I can describe it. I had a very particular shift one day. There was a big storm outside the house. I remember sitting in the kitchen and looking out the window and watching bits of the garden fly past me. And I remember thinking, this is what higher power gives you. No matter what's going on outside, it keeps you safe and calm. It was as clear as a bell to me that that was what I had been missing, that kind of safe space. I was stepping out into the storm, looking for the answer somewhere else, when all I needed to do was just sit with, let that come into me. And that was really powerful. And again, a little scary, because I couldn't really explain it. I like to understand what's happening. And that was for me. And again, I'm very grateful that I had a sponsor that helped guide me through it, because what she explained to me, the essence of spirituality is not knowing. That is the realm of being spiritual, is not knowing. And I just never had done that before, because I had to be little Miss Smarty Pants that knew everything and had the answer to everything. So that was a big, big shift for me. And once I genuinely let that energy and connection into my heart, I definitely moved into a different phase of the recovery. I reworked my steps again, and I found very different understandings. And I probably will work it pretty much every year, because I know that I'm not always going to be ready for what I need to know, that it might come over time. But what I definitely learned in that particular phase of my recovery was this need to really let go, and let God. And I thought I had been doing that, but I really hadn't. And that's because I will always default to self-will. And earlier on today, I was going to take my wee mum for some blood tests, and I put some music on, and a Pink song came on called Don't Let Me Get Me. And as she was singing, I'm a hazard to myself, I'm my own worst enemy, I was like, oh, I hear that song, honey. Definitely. And I think that was when I totally realized that I am my own worst enemy. I am the problem. And that was a kind of like, okay, well, that's interesting. And so as I did more and more work on the emotional side of things and reworking my steps, one of the things that I asked for of my higher power is show me what I need to know, but don't want to see. Because oftentimes, I mean, I've been the queen of avoidance. If there was an Olympic level for avoidance, I'd have the gold medal for that every year. And now, as uncomfortable as it can be, I really, really work to not avoid things. And my higher power is pretty persistent. So, as I started to get a better understanding of my character defects, I realized that they're never going to go away. They're never going to leave me. They are part of who I am. And I like visual things. And I realize my character defects are like a minibus of the Muppet Show, is the best way I can describe it. And that minibus is always round the corner from me with the engine running. And I have to be incredibly careful. And yesterday, I'm not going to lie, I found myself stepping onto the Muppet bus without realizing it with my thought life. Now, fortunately, it didn't turn into action, but I suddenly thought, oh, you're on the bus. You have let your thoughts run away with you. And I'll thankfully get that awareness, accept that that is my stinking thinking, and get back off the bus again. But I have to be incredibly careful and reset that every day. And that comes from my ego. I always thought I was very low ego. Of course, people with an ego do, though, don't they?
5 left.
5 minutes. So, what I recognize is if I can let go of the ego to really listen to what's happening, take advice, take guidance, usually from my higher power, I have genuinely found handing over, putting my trust, my faith, and really surrendering. And there's very little I surrender without having nail marks in it, folks. I will tell you, I'm never going to sit here and pretend this comes easily because it really doesn't. It's work. But where I know the emotional recovery is really kicking in and helping me is I'm now finding myself, we talk about people, places, and things. And I realized that for some of my recovery, I've used avoidance tactics to make life sort of simple and easy. And I am now embarking for the first time since my divorce 6 years ago. I'm now leaning into a relationship. And that is really, really putting my emotional sobriety front and foremost. And I couldn't be more grateful for the 12 steps in that. So, obviously, it's a very different thing when someone new is coming into your life. And so, I would say if there's one thing that has helped me massively, it's the handing over every morning of my thought life, because that's where the Muppets live. And that then leads to actions that aren't helpful. It then leads to, thankfully, it's not put me back in the food. But I know on a day-to-day basis, if I'm not careful, that bus will take me right off the edge of a cliff, which would be back in the food again. So being comfortable with not knowing, putting my trust and my faith in that there's a guidance that doesn't need to come from me, and it's probably best that it doesn't, and recognizing that it's phases. There's the work and the recovery is going to continue for the rest of my life, really. So step 11 for me is a biggie, making sure that I keep the physical, emotional, and spiritual in balance. And there's a little calendar I've got that isn't OA, but it felt really relevant because today's entry was simply love others as they are, love you as you are, and return to the present moment over and over again and as often as possible. And that's the only thing I can say from a recovery point of view, is I can only be in today and in now. As soon as I start going into tomorrow, the future, next month, next year, I lose my connection. I lose my balance. I lose that neutrality. And also accepting others, loving others as they are, and not trying to change, not having expectations of others or myself. And more than anything, not having my view of what the outcome should be. I don't know what the plan is for me. I genuinely don't know what my higher power has for me in store. All I know is my higher power has navigated me through health issues, redundancy, family bereavement, a whole host of life being lifey, particularly even in the last year. And my higher power is, if I stayed connected there and I stayed connected into program, and I navigated through it. It wasn't easy, it wasn't always comfortable, but it was safer. And that's what I would say for any of you who are in program today that are struggling with things that are going on in life, because life does get very lifey. Lean on your fellows. I don't know where I'd be without outreach. I don't know where I'd be without the meetings. If you don't have a sponsor, please, please, please get a sponsor. And if you are available to sponsor, recognize it is a greater gift for you than it is for the people you're sponsoring, because I can't imagine how my recovery would be without my sponsees. So, as someone who was always going it alone and who knew better, I can't believe the degree to which I have this network and this a way of life, literally a way of living, a design for living that allows me to deal with whatever comes in front of me. Some of it good. I mean, I can let good stuff throw me off my game, never mind the bad stuff. And I think the biggest thing for me has been allowing others to help me, allowing others to love me, and really accepting incredible joys that my higher power is putting in front of me, and knowing that I'm never going to be perfect, but I can just keep trying to progress and enjoying life. And that was what those other three, the last three pictures were massive shifts in life, where there's one where I'm on a little boat with friends in Amsterdam, because I wasn't frightened about capsizing the boat, which I would have been prior. So the physical shift of being able and just feeling utter joy at being with friends and not worrying. The one in the middle is me and my daughter at a music festival where I didn't have to worry about being on my feet all day, every day for 3 days, danced like an 18-year-old, had the time of my life. And the last picture I particularly wanted for this meeting because, first of all, I would never in a million years before recovery have got on whatever the heck that is, a mechanical bull. It took me 2 minutes to get on and 5 seconds to come off it. But that said, I got back on again and I was laughing as I fell off. And what I would say is, with each day that you're in the program, there are going to be times you're going to feel like you're on a mechanical bull and it's going to feel really tricky to hang on, but you've got help. In the same way that one of my friends came and boosted me by the backside onto the bull, you've got people in this room, in other rooms that will help you, and most of all, your higher power. And with that, is that me, Rita?
It is indeed.
With that, I will pass and thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Jane. What a wonderful message of depth and weight. I'm just going to read out a little paragraph from the big book on page 251 to back up your story. And it's in the story called The Man Who Mastered Fear. He said, I got down on my knees for the first time in 30 years. The prayer I said was simple. It went something like this: God, for 18 years, I have been unable to handle this problem. Please let me turn it over to you. Immediately, a great feeling of peace descended upon me, intermingled with a feeling of being suffused with a quiet strength. I lay down in the bed and slept like a child. An hour later, I awoke to a new world. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had changed. The scales had dropped from my eyes, and I could see life in its proper perspective. I had tried to be the center of my own little world, whereas God was the center of a vast universe, of which I was perhaps an essential but a very tiny part. It was well over 16 years since I came back to life. I have never had a drink since. This alone is a miracle. It is, however, only the first of a series of miracles that have followed one another as a result of me trying to apply to my daily life the principles embodied in our 12 steps.